Record. All right, thank you everyone for being here today. My name is Carson McPherson-Krutzke, and I am the Community Engagement Coordinator and co-founder for the Hazard and Climate Resilience Institute. And I am excited today to have our panel talk about what does it take to have resilient infrastructure. So we will be recording this and there are closed captioning available if you go down into the information at the bottom and turn on live transcript, you can view that. And please be sure to mute yourself throughout the duration of the panel. We're going to have about 20 to 30 minutes of facilitated questions, and then I will open it up to audience questions. And feel free, if you do have questions while we're just talking, go ahead and put that in the chat, and we will get to that at the end, or we may bring it in during the middle if it seems relevant. All right, so I'm going to give a quick introduction and then I will turn it over to the panelists. So for those of you who haven't been to our panels yet, we've only had 2 so far. The goals of these panels are really to connect across disciplines and sectors, to learn about ongoing community resilience projects and organizations here in Idaho and beyond. Find out how university researchers and students can support local efforts and information needs, and also consider what are the actions that we can take moving forward to build community resilience, and then start taking steps to do them. So because resilience can take on many different definitions, I like to remind people the one that we have adopted, which is that community resilience refers to the capacity of a community or region to adapt to change and thrive despite the chronic stresses, such as access to resources or climate change, and acute shocks like flooding or wildfire that they may experience. I also have brought this figure up in each of our talks because I think it's valuable to think about disasters being the combination of all of these different things. There's the social conditions, the political conditions, the economic conditions, and the environmental conditions that all come together to either create disasters or mitigate them. And you may have noticed from the first 2 talks, the first talk was about social equity and climate change. The next talk was about water, and today we're talking about infrastructure. And so, you know, those topics may seem like they're all over the place, but really they come together when we think about building resilience because it is so multifaceted. So I think it's helpful to remember that all of these different petals are important to consider when we're talking about community resilience. I also want to acknowledge that in Idaho, we are in the traditional lands of the Shoshone-Bannock, the Shoshone-Paiute, the Coeur d'Alene, the Kootenai, and the Nez Perce tribes. It is also National Native American Heritage Month, and the Idaho State Museum is hosting a series of events throughout the month to recognize and honor the contributions of Idaho's Native Americans. And there's an event tonight, a documentary called Indians Who Rocked the World from 6 to 8 p.m. And it tells the story of Indigenous influence on American music and features Mildred Bailey, who's a Coeur d'Alene tribal member. So check that out if you are interested. All right, so now I'm going to introduce our panelists. We have Dr. Ron Fisher, who is the Director of Infrastructure Assurance and Analysis in the National and Homeland Security Directorate at the Idaho National Lab, or INL. He provides over 20 years of critical infrastructure protection experience, including serving on President Clinton's Presidential Commission on Critical Infrastructure Protection. Dr. Fisher has worked at INL for 8 years, and prior to that, 26 years at Argonne National Laboratory, serving as Deputy Director for the lab's Infrastructure Assurance Center. We also have Deborah Newby, who has over 20 years of experience in research and regulatory affairs in the national laboratory system and private industry. She focuses on converting innovative research into processes and scales capable of delivering real-world solutions. Her technical expertise combined with a passion for water quality fuel her commitment to ensuring Suez meets all regulatory obligations without exception, delivering the highest quality water possible to its customers. We also have John Bernardo, who is the sustainability strategist for Idaho Power Company. He identifies and implements sustainability initiatives into the company culture, oversees reporting to national, international, and investment-based organizations, promotes corporate social responsibility internally and externally, and sets, monitors, and reports carbon reduction goals, and manages the production of the annual ESG report. We also have from Boise State, Edward Vasco, who is the director of the Institute for Pervasive Cybersecurity. He is a successive entrepreneur with over 30 years of experience in the cybersecurity industry. And prior to joining Boise State, he established and was the senior VP at Avertium, a leading national cybersecurity service provider. And then before that, he was the co-founder and CEO of Terra Verde, based in Phoenix, which was also a cybersecurity service. So with those introductions, I'm going to stop sharing my screen. And I would love for the panelists to just go around kind of in that order and maybe talk a little bit more about their specific roles. And so we'll start with Ron.
Hello, everyone. I appreciate the opportunity to participate and grateful for this forum. You know, my years of experience have been heavily focused on the infrastructure resilience side. And, you know, as a national lab, we're run by the Department of Energy. We were very focused for years on energy resilience, security, and then the Homeland Security Act of 2002 hit and stood up the Department of Homeland Security and said, hey, DHS, you don't need your own national labs. You can use the DOE National Lab System to help you. And so we've had to retool this back in 2002 timeframe to make sure that we could address resilience across all the critical infrastructure areas, not just energy. And that requires partnership with a lot of external areas, a lot of partners. And I would say it's also kind of forced us to take a step back and say, you know, infrastructure is important, infrastructure resilience, but you got to factor in community resilience, organizational resilience, social resilience, and personal resilience. And I don't know if I can, I'm just going to kind of show this, but I wrote a paper that kind of helped me kind of see the world in this holistic resilience lens, because I was, you know, for years I was myopic on the energy systems and just that part of it. But it really, if we're going to do resilience right, it's got to be holistic. And so we have a role in the labs. Everyone has a role. We all have roles personally. One of the things we've done at INL is created the INL Resilience Optimization Center, or IROC, to help us better collaborate because it is so important.
Thank you, Ron. Do you have a link to that that you could pop in the chat if people wanted to check that out?
Yes, I will do that.
Great. And then let's move on to Deborah. You want to enter?
Sure. You might have noticed from the pictures that I had the same background as you, Ron. So I spent about 15 years over at Idaho National Laboratory. And then I moved back over into the Boise area. So the perspective I'm going to bring to the table today is a little bit more focused locally for the Boise area. I am currently the regulatory manager over water quality for Suez, which is our local water utility. And just to give you guys a little bit of perspective, because I think it will come into play when we talk about resiliency. I mean, I guess I took it for granted most of my life. I went to the tap, I turned on the water, there was water. It was expected, it was there, then it was good quality. When I took this position with the water utility, I was awakened to the fact of the complexity of it. So just to give you guys a perspective, we have over 100,000 different connections that we provide. We're providing water to over 250,000 people in the valley here. It takes us about 1,400 miles of pipe to deliver that water. Very, very complex number of pressure zones and things along those lines, which all come into the play for what we do. But when I step back and I think about what does it mean for us as a water utility, I think we've been challenged this last year, as has everybody else, with COVID and every other kind of disaster that's come up, and thought, well, how do we ensure that our operations continue through that? And so those are kind of the things that, you know, we leverage this complex system to ensure that we have that. And we also are looking for partnerships and dialogue with other utilities, with other people in the area, and just preparing for the unknown. We have a motto that says, prepare for the worst. And so that's what we do in terms of resilience.
Thank you, Deborah. Let's move on to John.
Well, good morning. I'm with Idaho Power, and since I do sustainability for the company, I've kind of got my fingers in a lot of areas of the company. I'm going to focus on two that are very important for resiliency. We are one of the largest hydroelectric generators in the country. About 45% of the electrons we provide to you come from hydropower. So obviously, if we don't have precipitation or runoff in the spring, we don't have fuel for our hydro plants. So trying to maintain water levels is important to us. Proper use of that water and even cloud seeding to get more precipitation from winter storm clouds is something we've been pursuing for over 20 years. The other area of the company I'll focus on is our transmission lines. And obviously, once you generate the electricity, you need to move it around. And we are going to be, as the future holds, we're probably going to be more of a energy provider than an energy generator. And so there's going to be more private development of energy, solar, wind, geothermal, but they're still going to be using our lines to move those electrons around. So the resiliency of our transmission system is very important, but it's interesting that I follow Deborah. I think people can visualize that a water pipe can only hold so much water, but a lot of people don't realize that those wires on our huge transmission towers can only hold so many electrons. And believe it or not, for the area of Idaho Power Service area, we are near capacity in those transmission lines. So to bring in more renewable energy so we can reduce our carbon emissions, we need to have the capacity to do that. And so building and then, of course, protecting those transmission lines is a big part of our resiliency efforts.
Wow, thank you, John. All right, moving on to Ed.
Yeah, no, thanks. So happy to be here. Thank you, everybody. So everything that we've talked about up to me has in some way, shape, and form a cyber element. Technology is so pervasive, no pun intended, in our lives, irrespective of utility, social constructs, how we communicate. Everything that we do in some form or fashion, other than literally cutting the cord and walking out into the sawtooths and not wanting to know where you are, you're going to be using technology in some form or fashion. And so the resiliency of our critical infrastructure, the resiliency of our technology platforms, it is so hypercritical to the ability to deliver service, to deliver support. That's really where the Institute's focused, is ensuring that we understand the type of cyber adversaries that may be looking to do us harm. Those range from the kind of normal, I'll put this in quotes for those of you who haven't been in the industry for 30 years like myself, the normal attacks that we would anticipate from nation states, but it also now includes a new set of threat actors or cyber adversaries, and those include people who are looking to cause harm and break systems for financial gain. And when I say that, I mean, specifically the huge number of attacks that have occurred on critical infrastructure over the past 12 to 18 months and resulting in some form of ransomware, where systems are taken over and held for ransom until those adversaries are paid. Those systems can't actually perform the types of services required. So we are very, very focused here at the Institute around understanding our adversary, helping communities find methods and approaches to properly monitor, defend, and respond to those kinds of attacks that will impact both transmission lines, water distribution, water systems, our telephone systems, our entire telecommunications environment, our social structures, as well as our economic structures. So everything that Carson showed you in the slide that has a disaster, I sit in that focused disaster piece, constantly trying to figure out how and where that's going to be occurring.
Yeah, thank you, Ed. Yeah, I think as you all were speaking, I think it just drives home how complicated this idea of, infrastructure is almost like the same as the word resilience, in that you can define it in so many different ways and it takes on so many different meanings. And so I guess for your respective positions, I'd be curious to know, like, how do you define infrastructure from your respective organizations? Like, what does that encompass? And maybe we could start with John.
Infrastructure for us is obviously, it's the plants, the hydro plants, the natural gas, the coal plants that we operate to generate a flow of electrons or electricity. And it's also the transmission and distribution lines that are used to move those electrons from the plant to the customer and of course back again. So for us, infrastructure really is the hardware that we have, the plants that we maintain, and a lot of it is wire. And I'll just tell you, the largest single item that Idaho Power buys every year is fuel. The second largest single item is wire. And so it's the conductor that moves the electrons. So for us, I would say wire, transmission lines, that's a big part of our infrastructure.
Thank you. And then maybe Deborah, do you agree kind of with what John said, since you're coming from another sort of utility?
Sure. Yeah, it's very closely aligned. Of course, wire is not our primary one. In our case, it's pipes. So when we look at infrastructure, I mentioned in my intro that we have over 1,400 miles of pipe across about 150 square mile service area. So it's everything that goes into that. It's the pipe, it's the booster stations. How do we move the water from one location to another? It's a very intricate system. We have elements that have to do with the cybersecurity. It's a very advanced system with lots of juggling that goes on. We have to meet demand in different locations based on use, based on if there's a fire, things like that. And we have a SCADA system that helps us manage that and alerts us to any kind of issues there. So that's part of it. And I think outside of the physical assets that are clearly part of infrastructure, I kind of extend the definition a little bit further. And I think a system has to include the humans behind the scene as part of that infrastructure. I know that's a little bit different definition, but the hardware and the physical assets alone don't provide that critical infrastructure. It takes the people involved as well.
Thank you. All right, maybe Ron, do you want to take on that question too? How do you think of infrastructure at INL?
Thank you. We, first off, 80 to 90% of critical infrastructure is operated by the private sector. So we take a holistic view with Department of Homeland Security that really says, hey, there's 16 critical infrastructures and it's evolved over time. The number, whether they're assets, now there's focus more on functions than assets, but the critical infrastructures that would have economic, public health, quality of life impacts if disrupted, like electric power, telecommunications, water, wastewater, et cetera. But more importantly are the dependencies, one-way dependencies and interdependencies, two-way dependencies that these infrastructures have on each other is more of what we're doing, focusing on research-wise. And the supply chain, we've seen that obviously with COVID, but it gets even more complicated. And so one of the big topics now is SBOM, software bill of materials, and making sure that things are trusted and known in systems to get ahead of vulnerabilities, cyber vulnerabilities. So we're very big on the cyber physical connections of these critical infrastructures.
Thank you. And I think that probably leads well into Ed. How do you define infrastructure?
Yes. No, I'm kidding. It's just a simple word. It's everything. It's everything that everybody just mentioned. As Ron mentioned, there's clearly defined 16 critical infrastructure, categories, but it's truly understanding the interconnections and interweaving of those industries together in those categories. Take, for example, transportation. You know, if John's fuel that he's buying can't get to him because the transportation system is down, because the telecommunications system has been impacted so that the drivers don't know to go to Idaho Power that day to deliver fuel, the downstream impacts throughout the entire infrastructure fabric start to fray. So the resiliency, I think I'll flip the kind of question on its head, and that is, you know, that infrastructure is everything that we use to thrive and survive, not just as individuals, but as citizens within our respective communities, as residents, as workers in our employee sphere, as you know, individuals throughout in the country. So ultimately, it's the resilience of these infrastructure components that's so hypercritical, so that we can say, you know, and John can know clearly that if there is a telecommunications breakdown, or, you know, I'll take it a step further, there's a banking breakdown somewhere, that the bank that, you know, was meant to call the fuel company to pay the payroll for the employees that will deliver the fuel to John so that he can get you power to your homes. That one simple nugget of something breaking down well down inside the chain can have cascading effects that are kinetic in nature and impactful in nature. Flip that on its head and start asking, what's the resiliency of that infrastructure? And we start to identify where we have significant issues and concerns, not just within the physical plant, you know, the actual transmission lines John talked to, but also on the cyber side. You know, where are the specific elements and push points that, again, cyber adversaries could easily tip over the Jenga tower that make up the infrastructure that supports our society.
Carson, can I just add something?
Yeah, go ahead.
I really like what Ron and Ed said. So, you know, I'm very proud of Idaho Power. I think it's a very well-run company, but in the utility business, we're pretty small. Okay, Southern Idaho, Eastern Oregon, in comparison to a PG&E or a Duke Energy, we're very small. However, because we aren't just ourselves, but as Ron said, there's a lot of intertie, our transmission lines feed Seattle and Salt Lake and Wyoming. And so we are a target for the very threats that Ed talked about with cyber security, because if you take us out, you are really impacting a much wider area. And I will tell you that I'm on the same floor as our physical and cyber security people. And they have told me, and it's not a secret, on a weekly basis, we have hundreds of thousands of attempts by email to break into our system. And they've identified who's trying to do it, and they are nations, Ed, and they also are rogue actors. But just the fact that that much attention is on a small utility like us, you can imagine how much attention is on the larger ones. But because we're all interconnected, boy, that one area, I won't call it a weakness because we're trying to prevent it, but if we get hit, it's going to impact a lot.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, wow. And I think it's interesting to think about these different systems that we all kind of take for granted. You know, like Deborah was saying earlier, you just turn on the water or turn on the tap and there's water, or, you know, turn on the lights and there's power, or turn on your computer. So I guess thinking about these stresses that are put on the system, and kind of, you know, we've have this history that's built this infrastructure that we currently have, but now we have new demands that include, you know, population growth. There's climate change that are, you know, maxing out some of these systems we've already put in place. So from your perspective, what are some maybe challenges? I know you've identified a few already, and also potentially opportunities for planning for that, you know, changing future. So maybe we could start with Deborah.
Well, I think for those people here in the Valley, one thing that strikes a chord is, I'm sure people saw it on the news. There were a lot of people that had their wells, their private wells were drying up this summer. And that in large part has to do with climate change as well as just agricultural land use changes. So people that had those wells were in areas that used to be farmed land. They had an artificial kind of rainfall through irrigation on an annual basis that was recharging that aquifer. So those were pretty shallow wells to start out with. As we've grown and as the climate has changed, both of those things have limited the amount of recharge that's going on. And so that's an immediate impact on smaller systems for people, individuals. We're fortunate in that, again, we have this huge expanse of sources of supply. We have 79 wells in the valley and 2 treatment plants. So we are able to juggle and move things around. We also have wells that are much, much deeper. So I think that that's one thing just to keep in mind is that as we're seeing things change, and there's concern over drought, I want to assure people in the valley, we don't have a shortage of water. We have to be creative on how we manage the water that we have. And we have to also look at diversification. We're always looking at how do we optimize wells that we have in place. We have a new hydrogeologist that's part of our team. He's doing really cool stuff looking at well profiling. So taking a well we already have and saying, can we deliver higher quality or better quantity or both from an asset we already have? So again, planning for the future, as things change, how are we going to adapt and still continue to deliver the materials and the water and things like that that we need to do? So I think that's kind of an area for us. We also look very far in the future. We have a master plan that we work with a group of engineers on every year. So we go out, well, every 5 years, and we make a 15-year plan. What do we think we're going to need to invest in our infrastructure? What are our capital plans for 15 years? Now, those never turn out to be exactly what we thought. You know, it's dynamic and it changes way more often than we'd like it to. But again, you know, what do we see coming down the pipe in terms of growth, climate change? What do we need to do to improve our quality? So long-term planning is something I think that we're really proud of what we do for Suez and just thinking in advance of what's coming. So coming down the pipeline, no pun.
Nice. Let's go over to Ron. What would you answer that? So again, the question was thinking about with the new demands on systems, what are some challenges and potential opportunities?
You know, John's comment of, you know, thousands of potential attacks on Idaho Power system is similar with, you know, you hear that with other utilities, government systems, the lab. It's our reality. It's interesting. In 1996, 1997, when I was on the President's Commission of Critical Infrastructure Protection, we went to one of the first natural gas transmission pipelines that had installed SCADA, supervisory control and data acquisition. Huge efficiencies, big cost savings. But that first system didn't even have security built in. So anyone could dial up the system with a modem and make changes to that system. It wasn't even thought of that someone might hack in, and no passwords. And so that was the reality back then. So you see this huge evolution to today where we know we're getting attacked, and the industry has responded very well. Amazing changes have happened, especially in the energy sector, but not all the critical infrastructures are the same. And so one of my concerns today is that our medical devices, the more and more of those are coming online with technologies to connect them to the internet, but don't have this security. Just like this initial SCADA system, security was an afterthought. We need to be proactive in all of our critical infrastructure. So that's kind of my lesson learned here. But opportunities are to take lessons learned from sectors that are doing well, like power and water, and apply them to these other sectors that are still learning. I also think that in today's world, we need to promote a stronger culture of resilience individually. Our infrastructure owners and operators are very proactive, but how many people and communities are really concerned about resilience until a problem occurs? I mean, we're seeing more and more disasters, we should be more proactive. One of the things we're trying to do, I'm doing a test. I actually used Boise State's this Hazard Climate Resilience Institute group to help kind of vet some questions, but we're going to put out either a tool or an app to help people determine where they're at with personal resilience and see if anyone cares and if they want to know where they're at and how they may want to get better. And I think that as more and more events happen, more people will get enlightened. But it's, if we're going to succeed, we've got to do it holistically. Our infrastructure, our communities, socially, and personally. You know, when hurricanes Katrina, Rita, Wilma hit, and it was clear that, you know, people went to the football stadium. They, you know, weren't prepared. Basic things like having 72-hour supplies of food and water, having an emergency communication plan. There's a lot of low-hanging fruit that most people don't even think about.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, I see everyone nodding their heads to what you were saying, Ron. So thank you for that. John, do you want to comment on that?
Well, I mean, we know that people are going to want to generate their own electricity. They have every right to do that, and it's becoming more and more popular. So what that leads to is there more opportunity for what's called distributed generation, where you have areas that are making their own electricity and distributing them locally, not on a far manner. So that's something that we see isn't necessarily an opportunity. It certainly takes us off our usual game. So we have to handle things differently, but we've been around for 100 years and things certainly have changed. So that's one thing we know we have to change. But again, I'll just go back to the importance of transmission and distribution lines, how important those are, no matter how you're generating the electricity, where it's coming from, who's using it, you need the lines to move it around. And so for us, that's a very big part. And we try to be resilient, but you know, there's always better. You can always do better.
Thanks, John. Before I turn it over to Ed, Duncan Griffin had his hand up in the audience. So do you want to go ahead and?
Thank you. Yes, I think this is a fascinating conversation. I do feel like there's one group of non-human actors involved in critical infrastructure, which are the ecosystem services that we rely on, sort of making the assumption that they're there, but the wetlands, tree cover, all of these things, you know, when the heat dome events happened, areas with tree cover were 10 degrees cooler than areas without. And so I think that it's great to also plan for how we rebuild that ecosystem. Thanks.
Thanks, Duncan, for that question. My next question was going to be asking about natural capital. So I'm so glad that you brought that up. Do any of the panelists, does someone want to take that?
Yeah, no, I was going to say, I'll jump. Having lived a large portion of my life in Phoenix, Arizona, I can attest to the issues associated with infrastructure strain coming from both sprawl of our communities and also the heat dome effect. You know, what was, you know, a common 105-degree average during summer is now 112. You know, as a result of the sprawl. So those kinds of things are definitely happening, and the strain that it places upon the infrastructure elements that we take for granted. You know, to Ron's point, I mean, as individuals, you know, there's a wide adoption of the classic NIMBY, you know, not in my backyard, this won't happen to us. And that's prevalent both within industry and as individuals within our respective communities. You know, we don't necessarily take into account when we move into a new area that, you know, wildfires may impact us, and those wildfires may be 2 states over. Or as we saw this summer, you know, the wildfires that were impacting us, the ash ended up in New York City and Washington, D.C., just as much as it impacted Boise and you know, Medford, Oregon, and so forth. So the environmental impacts that we have certainly need to be taken into account, and how they're challenging the infrastructure elements that have been in place and those assets that have been in place for decades. You know, to John's point, there's only so many electrons that you can push through the lines. And, you know, if we're not necessarily enabling through, you know, whatever avenues and efforts we possibly can to understand how can we transmit more through different or more through more, and providing out the opportunity to increase the capacity of those transmission lines or increase the volumes that Deborah needs to push through the water lines to be able to get to new communities or to get to an increased number of citizens within a community. You know, the infrastructure that we already have will begin to break down irrespective. Add to that the element that Duncan raised, and there's a whole nother side of this ever evolving, ever changing cube that is both infrastructure impact and resiliency and how they play against each other.
Thanks, Ed. Yeah, does anyone else want to comment on sort of natural systems and how they, yeah, go ahead, Ron.
So this gets back to some key research areas at INL. You know, the lab itself, the lab director, we have a net zero emission goal now. So it's, you know, it's important. And we're trying to identify technologies that can help in this space. So for example, microreactors on the nuclear side, instead of building a 500 megawatt power plant, it's maybe 1 or 2 megawatts, and it's where it's needed, which could help reduce transmission and distribution lines. You know, going to Ed's comment, you know, NIMBY is real, not in my backyard. 10 years ago, I'd say the sentiment went stronger to banana, build absolutely nothing anywhere near anybody. And today it's called cave, citizens against virtually everything. That's, you know, that's our reality. And some of that is good because, you know, we have these heat domes. I was in Phoenix in May, and I was driving in a convertible at night, and you know, it's cooling off, it feels good. And then you go under a bridge on a road, and you feel that heat, that heat absorption, and it's all of a sudden 10, 20 degrees hotter as you're crossing over that. And you hear about how it used to be cooler, and the farms are gone, and infrastructure. And so we really need to have a balance. We really need to focus. So besides the technology, we have microreactors, we have renewables, we're pushing at the lab. We also need to look at usage and need this. And that's why I go back to this culture of resilience. When my kids were young, you know, I was oblivious to some of the environmental impacts that my actions had. And there was this great program to get grade school kids indoctrinated into the environment. So instead of trying to train adults like me who had bad habits, it was they come home and say, hey, mommy and daddy, don't you want the world to be there, you know, the environment to be there for me? Well, yeah, so okay, I'll start recycling and things like that. There's a lot of behavioral things that we can do better at.
Thanks, Ron. Deborah, do you want to?
Yeah, I just wanted to segue a little bit on that, in that, you know, we're the water company, and it's kind of ironic that we actually have a strong conservation program. We encourage people to use drought tolerant plants. We actually encourage people to use the different kinds of, you know, faucets and things like that to minimize the use of the water, because it's expensive for us to produce it and to clean it up and to distribute it. So, and it's hard on our system. So we really do advocate for water conservation, which is a little counterintuitive, but it does make sense. And aligned with that and the environmental aspect that we were just kind of touching on, I think, you know, watershed management and protection is really important. I think we've come a long way in recent years looking at some of the contaminants that have made their way into our water systems, and we're doing things proactively so that it doesn't get in the water and then we don't have to clean it up. So I think that whole environmental spin is really, really important, and as part of our, you know, to steal the holistic term, that's something we need to look at as a community. Like, what all of our actions impact on everything else. So if we can keep it out, if we don't have to clean it up, you know, those are all things that have direct and indirect implications for infrastructure.
Thanks, Deborah. John, yeah, quick one, because I want to move on to the next question. So go
I
ahead.
just want to relate to Duncan's comment about natural capital. So I don't know how many people realize, but there are 2 Snake Rivers in Idaho. And it happened over 100 years ago. But in Milner, which is northeast of Twin Falls, when that dam was built, it was built to divert water for irrigation. Very positive use. They divert 100% of the water to this day. So the Snake River has to reform downstream from Milner, which is pretty amazing if you think about it. And for a utility like Idaho Power, we rely on that water as fuel. We are really hoping that the Snake River reforms after Milner, or we don't have the cheapest, cleanest generation source. So that's just a certainly a human imposed constraint unique to Idaho that we have to work around. We've managed to do it. I think we can work around these other constraints, but we have to stay on top of the game.
Yeah. Wow. Thank you, John. Okay. So I have one more question, then I'm going to open it up to the audience for questions. But so my question is that on part of this panel is thinking about how we can start collaborating with, you know, university researchers and students with your respective companies or groups, organizations. So if you could give kind of a quick, maybe 30-second response on thoughts around how students or researchers could sort of help you answer some of the questions you have or get involved with the work that you're doing, that'd be great. And why don't we start with John, since you're just going.
Well, pardon me. First, I'd like to say I think it's awesome that INL is using HCRI for some of its research data. So congratulations. I think what Idaho Power needs to do is, as Deborah mentioned, we also promote energy efficiency because in the long run, it's better for everybody, even though it kind of shoots us in the foot financially. I think we need research into how can we look at distributed generation, how can we adapt to it? And are there new ways of building and new ways of even doing agriculture? I think for this state, industrial indoor greenhouses would be a great way to go because it not only would conserve energy, would conserve a lot of water. And those are 2 things we're talking about here.
Awesome. Thanks, John. Deborah, do you want to go next?
Sure. So I think there's a lot of opportunities in the water industry. We just had a water quality planning meeting earlier in the week talking about how, again, do we be proactive about emerging contaminants? So I think there's a lot of opportunities for research there. Are there new technologies that will help us clean things up? If it's in there, we're always looking for unique opportunities to do that kind of thing. And I think just thinking a little bit outside of the box, in terms of opportunities within the water system, we have a lot of the SCADA, we have a lot of GIS. I never would have thought about that. Hydrogeology. So lots of diverse opportunities that maybe people wouldn't traditionally think about. And normally we have a great opportunity for students to engage through a Work U program, which is 10 hours a week internship with us. That's been curtailed temporarily due to COVID. But we're hoping, optimistically that next year that's something we can bring back and would encourage people to participate in.
Great, that's good to know about. And could you put any information about how to find out about that? Or I guess we could send an email out to our team if once that's.
Yeah, I might have to do that. I don't have that handy right now.
Yeah, no worries. All right, Ron, go ahead. And then we'll finish with Ed.
Thanks. I'm just proud that I've unmuted myself every time.
Everyone's doing great.
I think my streak is 3 days. Every 3 days, I have some mess up. So there's a lot of opportunities at the lab. Lab is trying to be a good steward in the state instead of just kind of focused on DOE, who oversees us. I know there's big pushes you'll see at the lab for the whole region, state of Idaho, Utah, the whole region. Associating with groups like the Hazard and Climate Resilience Institute, with Ed's Institute for Pervasive Cybersecurity is helping us better connect instead of just saying, hey, we have positions posted. I mean, you're welcome to go to the website, look at the website. I think the lab had 300 or 400 interns last year, even with COVID. We have quite a few in our cyber and infrastructure area. And for me, resilience is broad. We have hardcore cybersecurity people, we have software developers, sysadmins, geospatial analysts, lawyers, engineers, all make up a multidisciplinary team. And there's a generic intern posting that will kind of go up here. I believe the cycle for summer is really about January, February, they start going up. So I'd have people look at that. If they have specific questions, they can reach out to me. I see Justin Welch is on. He's our operations director of IROC. Can reach out to Justin too. We want to be more involved. We're actually trying to get a bigger intern program going around resilience, trying to get that funded. But we do have, there's a big Idaho cyber initiative, and we have, I think, 20 slots or 25 intern slots this summer for that program.
Great. That's awesome. And that leads well into Ed. So if you could just spend about 30 seconds talking about student opportunities.
Yeah, sure. So we are hyper-focused at the Institute on ensuring that our students both have the knowledge from our great faculty and speakers that come in and talk to our students, but then also gain the necessary skills. And those two things go together, the knowledge and skills to make up the best possible cyber career professional. And those skills are developed through real world interactions, real world projects. So as Ron mentioned, we do quite a bit of work with the National Lab, and they've been very generous to enable the Institute to have a grant to go on and take students out into the rural and remote communities around Idaho to actually do assessments and help those communities understand the type of cyber risks that they may be exposed to. And also in doing that, give some education and awareness to those communities so that we stop any one of the three, two of which I'm gonna have to steal from Ron, those acronyms that we mentioned, NIMBY, Banana, and CAVE. And so it's that kind of knowledge and skill development that we're really focused on. So both for our students and the communities that we support. So, for anybody from an industry perspective, if there's any interest on aligning and working with us on projects for cyber, for our cyber students, please reach out. We're here to help everybody and anybody we can. Again, understand the significant fabric around cyber and how impactful it is at a technology, but also at a kinetic level.
Thanks, Ed. And everyone, I think it sounds like there's a lot of really neat opportunities that students and maybe researchers could get involved in. Okay, so we have about 12 minutes left. So I do want to give time for audience to ask some questions. So if you do want to ask questions, you can feel free to either raise your hand or pop it in the chat. So I think I'll look in the chat and see if we have, it looks like we have more comments than questions, but I do see here that Lyle Nelson speaks to having an interest in that personal resilience model that you mentioned, Ron. And Lyle works at St. Luke's and is involved in promoting personal resilience. He may follow up with you. Oh, let's see.
Okay. Yes. Yeah. I see his email. I'll shoot him a note. Oh, I should give a quick plug. Coulter Green's on. We've been working on this Idaho guidebook that just shows what critical infrastructure is in the state, trying to get that out to communities. We're just trying different things to try to help make a difference, and you'll hear more about that project.
Awesome. Okay, here we have a question from, is it Leela, I think. Given the multi-sector nature of resilience, could you speak to the difficulty of collaborating to build resilience? Whoever wants to take that one.
I'll take it. I go back to culture. It's interesting, after 9/11, every government agency at every level shared whatever information was needed. And you saw this level of cooperation. In fact, for high level events in the US, you have special security, physical and cyber teams come together, like the Super Bowl. And it was interesting to see after 9/11 how well those groups, cities, state, federal government agencies, all worked together, shared. And then 10 years later, you see it go back to, well, I'll share my information with you, but I won't share it with the other city because I don't want them to know what I'm doing. And we have to have the mindset like the military where, we're here to save lives and it's get the job done and be all in. And so resilience is culture. The culture side is a big deal to help collaborations occur. Even in Department of Homeland Security that has this important mission, you see people stovepiped and not trusting other components in DHS fully.
That's a great comment. Does anyone else want to speak to that question?
I have a different question. If
Let
we
me
haven't
just see
broke
if
off
there's
yet.
maybe one more response for that one,
Sure.
and then Robert will turn it over to you, because I think this is a really interesting one of, how do you actually collaborate on these big issues?
Yeah, the unfortunate thing I would say is that there's an unfortunate aspect of this is that, to Ron's point, it was post 9/11 that the stovepipe started coming down, but it took 9/11 to bring that about. So it takes a significant event of some form or fashion to bring about that opportunity for collaboration, and that's an unfortunate thing, and that's something that irrespective of event, you have this need for an event for collaboration, and then over time that collaboration begins, entropy kicks in and people begin to go back to their respective spheres. I would welcome the opportunity to say, let's find ways so that we can understand that tapestry of infrastructure. To come back to the scenario I mentioned at the very beginning, rather than having the Jenga tower that prevents John from delivering power to our homes or to our communities simply be because the bank has an issue that doesn't prevent X to become Y to become Z. Understanding that tapestry and where those both weaknesses and need for resiliency support is of utmost importance.
I just want to add one additional quick comment on that. I think another great opportunity for it is through drills. I know it's a smaller scale type of opportunity, but like we're gearing up to do an emergency response drill locally in February, and we're engaging some of our critical customers. We're engaging other emergency response teams, the fire department. We may tap the shoulder of Idaho Power to see. But I think some of those early dialogues are really important in terms of preparing for something that we can't forecast, but just doing what we can, building one-on-one relationships is really a key critical component.
Yeah, and kind of a summary from what you've all said is trust. You have to build that trust amongst these different actors before you can really rely on one another. So I think that's a good takeaway from that. All right, Robert, did you want to go ahead and ask your question?
Sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt. Thank you very
No,
much.
you're great.
So I had read back in September that the state of Idaho has put in a task force for cybersecurity. I was wondering if this is a perfect forum for them to give ideas on what their process is to keep all of these items that we're talking about interwoven without being disrupted.
Yeah, certainly. I mean, I think Robert's a good idea. As I sit on that task force.
Awesome.
So to be able to merge what we're saying here, bring that forward, because the task force certainly has a critical infrastructure subcommittee, and we're kind of trying to address these kinds of concerns and challenges. I think you've attended also the critical infrastructure subcommittee public meetings.
I did, but I wasn't, didn't seem to be as involved as this topic as being resilient. And it seems like it would be great to get their perspective on how we could do that.
Yeah, totally with you. And it's a great idea.
Yeah, I know INL's represented in the task force. And in fact, we just in the last week, one of our infrastructure managers, Kelly Wilson, briefed the committee on the infrastructure work. We've done resiliency assessments in the state and have some lessons learned from that. So it hopefully is working its way into the task force.
That's awesome. Thank you.
All right, well, I'm gonna wait and see if we have any other questions from the audience. I do have one that I'll ask kind of in the meantime while we're waiting. I think I like to end these with a little bit of hope. So sometimes it can feel a little doom and gloomy. So I guess I would love to hear from you kind of what gives you hope for the future, thinking about infrastructure and resilience. Whoever wants to take it.
I live in the
No,
cybersecurity world, so I don't have a whole lot of hope.
That's not so. That's not what you're supposed to say, Ed.
I'm not supposed to.
You know, I get people who, you know, we start talking about cyber threats and they're like, oh, we need to go back to analog and paper. And it's like, no. We, our economy, our advancements, we need technology. It's exciting. Technology can be good. It just needs to be balanced. And I think there is an awakening that we're seeing too with natural disasters and climate change, and hopefully that's going to lead to even more change. So I am optimistic. I'm still using technology. I don't turn Bluetooth on every device. It's like you use it smartly, and we just need to educate people. In fact, I'd love to see a resilience course at the university level, just like, hey, economics is required. I'd love to see a resilience course required. I think that needs to be in everyone's DNA.
Carson, what gives me hope is I've always believed in the entrepreneurial spirit. And because we're a capitalist economy, opportunities go with making money. And so believe me, at the power company, we've set this goal of 100% clean energy delivery by 2045. We're about 70% of the way there. I can't look you in the eye today and tell you how in 23 years we're going to get to 100%, but it's going to rely on some R&D that is occurring or hasn't occurred yet. But I have hope that we're going to figure out battery storage, and it's not going to rely upon lithium or rare earth metals that we don't have here in abundance. It's going to get figured out because we work as a nation. I think we work best when our back's up against the wall. I hope we don't get to that point, but I am hopeful that yes, because we're a capitalist economy, we're going to have people come out of the woodwork with ideas, and that's what's going to change things.
Thanks. That's great. Great point. Deborah, did you have any thoughts?
Well, shifting it back maybe a little bit towards a more personal perspective, I think about resilience not just in being able to continue to deliver whatever our critical asset is, but when I think resilience on a personal level is you get things that happen, things that are challenging, things you didn't predict that are really hard and disrupt you. But resilience to me is adapting to that and coming back stronger. And I think that we have a lot of resilient individuals in our community. And so I think that's our strength, is we take the hard knocks and we come back even stronger.
Awesome. Thank you, Deborah. I saw Chris Johnson unmuted. Did you want to say something, Chris?
No, just from following up with Deborah on the water sector and working with that a bit. The American Water Infrastructure Act required systems over 3,300 population served to complete a risk and resilience assessment by June 30th. And I think we have over 120 systems that fit into that build. And we only had 7 systems that failed to meet that requirement. And that was basically a lack of communication on their part. And we've already reached out to them and we're fixing that. But we still have 80% of our water systems in Idaho are very small. So they fit underneath that umbrella. So I think there's a lot of opportunity to reach out to these smaller systems, work with Ed and get his group out there and get these risk and resilience systems to these smaller water systems. And it's just been really good to have this conversation and working with Ed and seeing what John can do with power. I know in the ag sector, we're really looking how to reduce in-farm energy use, and where do we go with the solar powers on corners that we're taking out of production. There's so many opportunities, and so there's a lot of good discussion, and this was a great forum. Thank you, guys.
Thanks, Chris, for that comment. And yeah, I think we're wrapping it up here now. And I really appreciate all of the conversations we've had today. I think it's been just fascinating to listen to your different perspectives on infrastructure. And hear where you agree. And yeah, and I'm excited. I think today we also talked a lot about some of the topics that we're going to be focusing on for the next event. So we actually are going to take a pause for December for our monthly event. So we're not going to have an event next month, but then we're going to pick it up in the new year, talking about personal and mental health resilience, which I'm really excited about. And then following that, we're going to talk about nature-based solutions. So some of the topics that we touched on today. So thank you everyone for coming, and we will see you in the new year. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.